Hey guys, welcome to Fundamentals of Design, a TUS Plus premium course. I'm Adi Purdila and today's lesson is Design Elements Intro. Now, if you're a beginner or a veteran, your design toolbox is pretty much the same. In any type of project you're working on, you'll have to use color, textures and patterns, lines and shapes, mass, and typography. So let's have a look at each one of these and learn how to use them effectively. At the end of all this, you'll get a nice assignment so that you can apply what you've learned. Let's start with color. At its essence, color is used to convey emotion, to trigger certain moods, and, if used wisely, to add a whole new dimension to a design. Let's take these two examples. A wheat field. What kind of emotion does this trigger? What words are you thinking of when you see it? Could it be summer, warmth, gold, hot? That's happening because the composition has warm colors like red, yellow, and orange. What about this? The North Pole. What are you thinking of? Ice? Cold? Dark? Loneliness? This one is using mainly blue with different hues, so it is using a cold color. What about some websites? Have a look at this, the girl effect. Playful, young, warm, fun, right? What about this? Juice box. Maybe professional, cold, precise, clean. And these are just a few examples of what you can do with the right colors if you want to transmit a certain emotion to the viewer. Color is not mandatory though. You can create a great design with just black, white, and some gray. Let's look at some examples. In this case, color is used sparingly and only to create emphasis on certain elements. Take a look at this. See the great contrast and how the portfolio image stands out from the rest of the website. So, to wrap things up regarding colors, remember this. Use colors to trigger a certain emotion or to create visual hierarchy in the page. Color is not mandatory. You can create great stuff with just black and white. Let's move on to textures and patterns. When we think textures, we generally think fabric, clothing, jeans maybe. We think paper texture on a business card or a brochure. What about the web though? Well, we can use textures and patterns in a design to make it more interesting, to make it fit a certain theme, or to give it a personality of its own. Let's see some examples. Hey Indy, for instance. It has a grainy, paper-like texture in the background, and that one complements the vintage color scheme and the condensed typeface very well. What do you think would happen if we got rid of that texture? Well, somehow it's just not the same. It looks too plain, too simple, incomplete. Here's another example. Toby Powell. We have a nice crumbled paper texture on the page background, and it gives it personality. It looks like an old newspaper. Watch what happens when we replace that texture with a simple gray color. Again, not the same. What about this? A restaurant website. See the letter texture we have on the center menu. It says style. It says class, elegance. What if we replace that with a plain brown, which its color is pretty close to the color of the leather? Have a look. Are you still thinking class and elegance now? Maybe not so much. But these are just textures. What's the difference between a texture and a pattern? Well, in very few words, a pattern is a much simpler element that has to be repeated to mean anything. For example, here's a pattern. It looks like it's cut off from a bigger image, right? But if repeated, it will create this, the background for the page, which is a whole different story. Same goes for this one. And the final result. So to wrap it up, consider this. Use textures and patterns to create a theme for your design and to give it some personality. Don't overdo it though, because you might just end up with a pretty picture but not necessarily a usable design. Lines and shapes. Now, these two can be used as structural or decorative elements. Normally, we use lines as separators, maybe to divide a paragraph, to separate blog posts, or to create a footer area. Look at the visual hierarchy it creates here. This is Skype's website. You immediately know where one section ends and the other one begins. If you take it out, it just doesn't look the same, does it? I mean, one could argue that the hierarchy is still preserved in some way by the text headings, but it's not so obvious. Now, lines can come in many forms. They don't have to be 1 or 2 pixels in size. Think about Skype's website. That's not really a line, but it acts as a divider. Same goes for this, again on Toby Powell. He uses the double lines to reinforce the main theme of the website and to separate the entries on his portfolio. So these are used as structural elements. What about decorative? Have a look at this. See how the lines and shapes are used as artwork in the background? Or this. This one has a nice theme enforced by the use of a great color scheme, very nice textures, and some hand-drawn imperfect lines and shapes. But imperfect as they are, they do make this unique. What about shapes though? Why do we use them as structural elements? Well, long story short, they allow us to organize information much better and, in turn, scan a page more easily. Beware though, using shapes by themselves might not do much. You might need to use colors, textures, maybe patterns to make a difference. Let's have a look at Media Parker. Now, they make great use of shapes. Very clean, you can scan the information right away and find out exactly what you need. Here's an illustration of their cloud solution. Again, you find out right away what's it about. They use circles with very descriptive icons for each individual service or module. The circles are also used in their pricing table, which makes it very easy to understand. See what I mean about colors? If you would have the same color on all 3 circles, then it would be kind of confusing for the user. So remember, you can use lines and shapes as structural or decorative elements. And for maximum efficiency, most of the times they are used in conjunction with color, texture, and patterns. Next, we'll talk about mass. Well, what is mass? Mass is just a fancy word for size. And it's very important actually, because it can make or break a design. It doesn't matter if it's print or web. It doesn't matter if you have a great color scheme or some great textures and typography. If you get the size wrong, then all your hard work has been in vain. Think about print. As a designer, you'll eventually have to do some business cards or some cool thank you notes. What happens though if you make those notes too big to fit inside a standard envelope? Yeah, I mean, your company just wasted time and money on print. Now you gotta go back, redo them on a smaller size, and print them again. The same goes for web. What if you make some elements too big to fit on most of your target audience's screens? You'll just end up with a bunch of frustrated clients that can't use your website. And these situations can easily be avoided with a bit of research. Now, you normally use size to emphasize something, to make it stand out. Have a look at Hey India again. See how big the header image is compared to the other images? And it's backed up by bigger text. So immediately you know that section is more important than the others. And making something bigger is not always the solution though, because size is relative. You can have a 200 by 100 pixel image in a very large document and it will look kind of small. Put that in a 250 by 250 document and it's going to be huge, taking up most of the space. And this brings us to contrast. You can use it in your favor by having a small element in a big page with no other content around it. But being so small, it will attract all the attention. So remember, size is very important in your designs, whether it's print or web. Do a bit of research before starting your project and be aware of outside limitations. You don't have to make something very big to stand out. By using contrast, you can achieve the same effect with very small elements. Finally, let's have a look at typography. Now, some people consider typography to be the soul of design. Robert Brinkhurst, the author of The Elements of Typographic Style, says, typography exists to honor the content. The truth is, we can talk about typography for ages, and we would not be bored, just like colors. It's a very extensive area. But to summarize it, we can think about typography as the design and use of typefaces to help communicate different content. Now, you might think, well, why is that so important? I mean, text is text, right? Well, not exactly. Given the immense repository of fonts that exist today, you can use typefaces in conjunction with other design elements to create really unique, stunning, and beautiful designs. Here's some examples. Now, these are illustrations, and you can have much more freedom when choosing the fonts. You can even choose Arial and make an outstanding design by adding texture, color, and depth. Web typography is a bit different though. We must play by a different set of rules when designing for web. It's no longer enough to just choose a font and a color. We must think about readability and screen optimization, among others. So quickly, let's go over some of these concepts and try to define them. Legibility. This one refers to how easy it is to distinguish characters or letters from one another. Readability. This one is basically the ease with which the text is read and understood. Measure or line length. This is the length of the individual lines of text. You should know that 66 characters is regarded as the optimal line length. Finally, tracking or letter spacing. This represents the space between letters and can also be viewed as the density of the blocks of text. So these are the basic concepts behind web typography, and as you can see, it's a bit more complicated than just choosing a font. So remember, the key to a good design is good typography. Web typography is a bit different from print, and you must consider concepts like legibility, readability, measure, and tracking. Now, for your assignment, I want you to make a list of your 5 favorite websites. On each one, identify the elements we talked about: color, texture, patterns, lines and shapes, mass, and typography. And then play around with them, change them, see how that affects the final results. Change the color of the text, see if you can remove the textures if there are any, see how that impacts the whole design. And then think about what would you do different in each of these 5 areas. Finally, experiment with your own designs and have fun. Go crazy with them. So next time on Fundamentals of Design, we're going to cover color theory and schemes. This is Adi Purdila, and from all of us here at Tuts Plus, thanks for listening.